Welcome again to Sofa Sermons. Today we are going to be looking at apologetics a little bit. We are going to look at the big question of why is there suffering in the world? If there's a perfect God, a loving God, why does he allow people to be put through pain and horror? It's obviously a very difficult question, and it's probably one that all of us have been asked at one point or another, and I'm not going to be arrogant about this and say that I have a perfect answer, because I definitely don't, but hopefully I can offer you some sort of help in your own answers. I think the first thing to consider is, who is God? God is the almighty, all-powerful being that created everything everywhere. He is our Father, and he loves us. Now, when you look at God as this parental figure in our lives, there is an immediate comparison you can make to something in our day-to-day lives, and that is our own parents. Now, if you look at your own parents, would you say that they have allowed you to go through some suffering in your life? The answer to that question will be yes. They haven't tried to shield you from all suffering ever. And part of the reason of this is because suffering and pain are an important part of our development in order that we know the best things that are in our lives. We can really appreciate the good things. So it only follows that God would have the same sort of perspective as a human parent, and that he would allow us to go through some pain and some suffering in order to develop properly and to really appreciate the better things in our lives. On top of that, if you actually look from a Christian perspective and you go into Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount, Jesus very clearly says that people that are suffering are blessed. Now, this can be taken a couple of ways. Obviously, it can be taken in the way that I've already explained, that you're blessed because you've got such an appreciation of what is good in your life, of who God is and what it means to be loved by a perfect Father. And on the other side, you can look at it as though you're going to be rewarded more in heaven for your suffering. If we go back in the Bible a little bit more, go back to Job, you can see that he went through some terrible, terrible suffering, and that God allowed this to happen. And then if you look at the end of Job, this is where God actually speaks to Job and kind of begins to reply to Job's complaints and his hardships. And God just clearly says to Job that we are just underqualified as human beings to understand everything that God ever does. So another way of looking at it is we just don't know. Why should we know why there's so much suffering in the world? We aren't God, and I think it would be very limiting to say that everything that God could ever achieve could be understood by humans. He is not a human, and he is far, far greater than you or I. So the idea that there should be something out there that he understands and we don't shouldn't come as such a shock to people as it does. But that's the truth of it. We don't understand everything about it. And if you do look at the book of Job, you'll see that everything is restored to him at the end, and he lives a happy life, lives a further 140 years, I think it was, after his suffering, in total tranquility. So there's that side of it as well. It does seem as though the people that do go through suffering are rewarded in later life and in the next life, and that's something worth bearing in mind when you look at that. When you get to the Christian perspective and you start to see things as a Christian, it's very important to know that you can't understand everything, and that's something that you probably have got by now if you are a Christian. But on top of that, there's so much more to life than just this life. So any suffering that is experienced in this life is really nothing. That in itself makes suffering look a little less horrible. And then you've only to look at some of the most important people to have changed the world. Each and every one of them has experienced suffering at some point in their lives, and most of them have taken that suffering and drawn upon it, and it's made them into who they were, so that they were able to change the world in whatever way that they did. It's simply a way of life. We suffer, we overcome, and then we get back up and we're stronger and we do things and we do big things. So yeah, there is suffering in the world, and some of it seems incredibly unnecessary and incredibly terrible, but it's not truly terrible when you look at the amazing, amazing life that God has planned for us. And so from a Christian perspective, whilst we can't understand it, we can understand that we can't understand it. And we can be satisfied with that. So that's the end of this apologetics video on suffering. Feel free to share it with a friend, and if you've got anything else that you'd like me to do it on, please comment, and I'll do that. And, you know, if you're liking the videos, please subscribe. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.